would you do if you found out that the government took your child, your little preschool child, kindergarten child, and strip searched that child, and they thought they could get away with it? Well, we're going to talk about a case just like that in the second half of this show. But in the first half of the show, I want to talk about another attack on our children, and it's through government education. We have with us here in the studio someone who I highly respect, a very bold and courageous woman, Rebecca Friedrichs. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Rebecca, you have been very bold in the past. You're a teacher, public school teacher, but you actually stood up to the unions and the right of public school teachers not to have to be forced to be a part of a union and pay union dues to an institution that supported things they don't agree with, that didn't represent them. And your case went all the way to the Supreme Court. It was a 4-4 decision, and the issue wasn't resolved. In a later case, the Janus case, it was resolved, and a very favorable decision liberating public workers all across America and all non-right-to-work states. Of course, right-to-work states, they don't have to be a part of a union, but in the non-right-to-work states, they were being forced. All these government workers were liberated in that very important case, that Janus decision. And yet, we still have a lot of challenges facing us today with regard to our government schools. Now, you wrote a book. I want to highlight this right off the bat. It's called Standing Up to Goliath. Standing Up to Goliath. It's a very interesting book about how we don't have to be intimidated by the government and institutions like unions. We can actually stand up to them. What inspired you to write this book, and tell us about it?
Well, in short answer, God inspired me to write Standing Up to Goliath. All throughout our lawsuit, actually throughout my 28 years of teaching, God kept putting on my heart to speak out against these unions because they use the money of Christian teachers to fund abortion, to fund the demise of Judeo-Christian values, to fund the removal of our values from our classrooms. They lie to us. They bully us. They bring harm. That little girl who was strip searched, I wouldn't be surprised if that happened because of some policy brought forward by government unions. So these unions tell teachers that they are our friends, that they're doing all these favors for us, and that's a lie too. They've gotten into our schools. They've gotten unfettered access of our children, and they've done that through bullying teachers. So what the Lord kept speaking to me was Revelation 12:11. They overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, and they couldn't be afraid of death. So He just kept telling me, go forward, give me your 2 little mites, girl. Just give me what you got. I'll do the rest. Tell these stories. So when we took the case to the Supreme Court, a lot of teachers from around the country started reaching out to me. And so I found some other brave teachers out there who have fought at the state and national levels of teachers' unions. They've been spit upon for trying to fight for Judeo-Christian values. They've been told there's a special place in hell for them for daring to stand up for little kids. And so I gathered all of their stories. And this book is a compilation of all of our testimonies. And we expose the unions for a radical sex ed agenda, for horrible discipline policies that have caused our classrooms to become war zones. And so we just expose it all. And that's what God asked me to do, and He's blessed it.
Yeah, I really appreciate it because you are one of those people standing up to Goliath in the past and even presently by coming out with this book, frankly. I mean, you're still a public school teacher, correct?
Sort of. I had to resign this year because I fight this full-time now, and my district could not give me another year leave of absence. So I had to either decide, go back in the classroom full-time and not have time to fight this, or fight this full-time. Wow. So I fight it full-time. I miss the students so much it hurts. I saw this adorable little boy the other day, and I just started bawling because I miss my students so much. But somebody has to speak out for them. Somebody has to shine the light of truth on a very dark union that is working with other organizations like Southern Poverty Law Center and to literally hijack the teaching profession and our schools, and teachers don't know it. And we have all these millions of Christian teachers paying these unions literally about $5 billion annually tax-free.
Wow.
Yeah.
$5 billion annually tax-free.
Tax-free.
And they're using that to buy books and pencils and erasers for kids, right? No.
Absolutely not. The kids get zilch.
Yeah. I find that it's so typical of where we are in our society today, with unions taking advantage of teachers, pushing their agenda, and at the expense of children in public education. And
Exactly.
when you hear them going on strike, it's not because they want more educational support for kids. It's they what do they want? They want higher pay, right? They want higher salaries.
Yeah, well, they tell the teachers these strikes are for higher salaries, but I actually had an editorial in Fox News this week on this very topic, because this week is National Teacher Appreciation Week.
Right.
So how do unions appreciate teachers? Well, they come in, they destroy our classrooms, they stress us out. So many teachers have PTSD today and are leaving the classroom because it's so stressful. Why? Because we've been politicized. Teachers think, oh, it's the legislature and the administrators that are politicizing us. No, teachers, it's your union. Your union has corrupted your school boards, corrupted administrations. It's all the union. So what's the union doing to celebrate teachers this week? They have us all out striking, saying ugly things, behaving in an ugly manner. That's not teachers. And if you watch these strikes, the activists that are in the front, activists, quote-unquote teachers, masquerading as teachers, they lead the charge. The sweet, loving teachers are in the back. They're mortified. They don't want to be out there. They want to be with the kids.
Yeah, I have seen public school teachers on strikes. They don't act professional. And they're actually a bad example for our children.
Exactly.
That are in government schools. It's really shameful and disgraceful to watch how they carry themselves.
Yep.
And in their messaging, and it's very crude.
Right. Well,
and
exactly. And I have to say, on behalf of good and loving teachers, they are not speaking for us.
Right.
That is those activists that the unions have planted in our schools. And to be honest with you, they're actually bringing Antifa and other angry, divisive people out to these strikes.
Dangerous.
Because, the teachers' unions are behind Antifa. They're behind the Women's March. They're behind pushing Black Lives Matter. They're behind Take a Knee. They're behind all of this stuff. Hashtag not my president. Teachers are not. Teachers' unions are. And so they put these teachers who masquerading as teachers in the front. And real teachers, I'm the voice of real teachers who are mortified by this stuff, who would never, ever abandon the kids. But if they don't go out on strike, then they're going to lose their job or be harassed for the rest of their career. So they're cowed. I mean, they're kowtowed into doing this.
So what are the things that teachers' unions are telling teachers that is simply not true? How are they manipulating teachers to be a part of a teachers' union? Because right now, they don't have to be a part of a teachers' union. They have to pay a penny to the union. And in fact, we at Pacific Justice Institute have a separate website called choosecharity.org, where they can go and get all the information and easily opt out of the union and all union dues.
Great.
So what are they telling teachers to deceive them, to keep them under their control?
I love the word deceive, because that's exactly what unions are doing. Well, there are about 1 million lies they tell teachers, but I'm going to share the top 5 with you today. So the number one lie unions tell teachers is that we need them, that they are our saviors, that the whole world is out to get teachers, that these education people who want to make education better and have charter schools and school choice, that they're the enemy, that they're going to harm teachers, and so unions need to defend us. That's a lie. Those people just want what's best for kids. And guess what? What's best for kids is also what's best for teachers. So if we had school choice all over, teachers would have choice too. They wouldn't be trapped in schools that feel like war zones.
Yeah.
So that's the first lie, that they're our saviors, and that they're defending us from unscrupulous administrators, unscrupulous school boards. Teachers, I'm here to tell you, the only reason we have any unscrupulous administrators and school boards is because the unions put them there. and the unions are protecting them. So the second thing they tell us is that our administrators are dirty, rotten scoundrels, that we can't trust them. So the unions have come in and they've driven a wedge. They've divided teachers from parents, teachers from administrators, administrators from parents, everybody divided.
Right.
So it's such an awful environment.
Right.
There's really no collaboration.
Right.
That is the fault of unions.
Yeah.
But they've told teachers it's everyone else's fault and the union's there to fix it.
Yeah, in fact, I remember there was a training material that they sent out to teachers on how to deal with Christian parents to keep them out of scrutinizing the new sex ed materials and curriculums.
Yeah.
It was actually targeted specifically for Christian parents.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. What's number 3?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to say it. What you
Go
just said, what they're doing is evil. That's
Yeah.
evil with a capital E.
Yeah.
You do not do anything to harm any parent. You're supposed to be collaborating with parents.
Right.
Our schools are supposed to be parents and teachers working together. We don't need these unions who
Right.
are doing those sorts of things, dividing people and literally attacking
Right.
parents of faith. Okay, the third thing they tell us is if you don't pay the union, you're a free rider. You're getting something for nothing. We're doing all this. We're representing you. We're getting you this great pay and this great pension, and you want it for nothing. You're a free rider.
What's the truth?
The truth is the unions are the free riders because they came in and they forced themselves on teachers using mafia tactics, by the way, and terrifying us. They claim that they're doing all these wonderful things to represent us, but they're not. They're representing themselves.
Right. Their interests and their power. What's number 4?
Number 4 is that we teachers need them for liability insurance because everyone's going to sue us. Some kid out there is going to get mad and sue us, and parents are going to sue us, and we're all going to be sued. And teachers believe all of this and that we need their liability insurance. Well, I'm here to tell teachers 2 things about that liability insurance. Number 1, you can get double the coverage for a fraction of the cost through Christian Educators Association International.
Yes, wonderful group.
Amazing group. And it doesn't come with any politics. None of your money will go to politics. You're paying $1,000 in dues now. Most of it is going to politics, about 80% of it. And teachers think it's only $20. That's a lie, about 80%.
Right.
Actually, pretty much all of it. Christian educators won't do that with your money. The second thing about your liability insurance, teachers, I know that the unions have told you that if you have a job action against you, like they're going to fire you over nothing or some small mistake you made, that the unions will defend you. That's a lie. One of my friends was just fired in 3 days. She did nothing wrong. She had paid her union dues for 26 years. The union, she goes, "Where's my $1 million in coverage? Why aren't you defending me?" And they said, "Well, you're not being sued. Your boss just wants to fire you. We don't defend you for that. Do you have $100,000? Then we'll defend you."
Yeah, and also I know of a teacher. He's a Christian teacher, and the union didn't like him. They didn't like his beliefs. So they were, quote, representing him, and he really wasn't being represented. So it's really not worth anything in that regard. We're almost out of time. What's the 5th reason?
Gosh, we went fast. The 5th reason is the unions claim you'll lose your pay and your pensions. That is not true. Your pay and pension are connected to your district. Right. Union has nothing to do with it.
Right, but they're lying and they're very deceptive.
Yes.
And once again, I salute you and the book you wrote. Folks, it's Standing Up to Goliath. Learn how you too can stand up to institutions that are bringing so much evil into our public schools, our government schools, at the expense of our children and their future. Rebecca, thank you so much for being with us on this show. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
So on June 7th, I went to pick up my daughter from kindergarten, and she ran up to me and said that her friend was no longer a boy, he was now a girl, and that he had a new girl name. Went home, asked my daughter about it. I looked up the book on YouTube. My daughter told me the name of the book. It was I Am Jazz. So we watched the book being read, and we found out that she had been taught what transgenderism is. He had come to school dressed as a boy. The teacher had read the book, and afterwards he went into the bathroom, which was in the classroom. He went into the bathroom, changed into a dress, and came out. He was then announced as his new girl name, and the class was told that he was now a girl. For my daughter, having that book read and then seeing her little friend that she had known since preschool go into a bathroom, change clothes, and come out, in her 5-year-old brain, she thought, oh my goodness, all I have to do to change into a boy is to change my clothes. My daughter was taking a bath, and she got up out of the water and her hair was slicked back, and she saw a reflection of herself. And she started crying and shaking, and she was like, Mommy, I turned into a boy. I don't want to be a boy. And she was scared. She was really concerned about what she was wearing or how she looked. There were other kids in the class that were afraid that their blood could turn into boy blood. Another little boy went home, and his mom had to have the entire sex talk with him about body parts. It was very confusing. And again, the parents had no idea what had been taught in class. So they were all exposed to this highly controversial sexual topic without having any, without even thinking about their own sexuality yet. There were members of the LGBT community that were actually transgender that came up to us and said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that happened. And I stand with you, and I'm for parental rights. And that wasn't right what happened, and I'm so sorry that got taught to them. And that to me was just so amazing, because the point of it was I was protecting my daughter and the other kids in that class, because they all have the right to be protected, all of them. And so it was actually really beautiful. I loved working with the Pacific Justice Institute because I felt like they had my same heart. It wasn't about fear or judgment or anything. It was like, hey, let's support you and help you through this, and let's fight for the rights for everybody. It was never about hate or anything, which made it super easy. I would totally recommend Pacific Justice Institute if you have something that happened at your school, if you have legal questions. Don't be afraid to stand up for what's right and to protect your kids.
When we heard about this situation at Rockland Academy, we got involved right away. We gave counsel to the parents on what the law did or didn't say, and we drafted a model policy for the charter school to adopt. Now, unfortunately, the school refused to apologize to the parents for the lack of communication, and they also refused to give a strong assurance to the parents that they would receive prior notice or that they would have the opportunity to opt their children out of similar circumstances in the future. If you ever have trouble with your school teaching your child something that you feel is not appropriate for your child, don't hesitate to give us a call or go to our website, pji.org. We're here to help. Folks, if you'd like to support the Pacific Justice on either a one-time or a monthly basis, just go to our website, pji.org. That's P for Pacific, J for Justice, I for Institute, pji.org. And while you're there, sign up to receive our Legal Insider. It's our weekly update on interesting, exciting cases taking place that you're going to want to know about that you usually don't hear in regular media. So go to our website, pji.org. Now, we have with us on the line our Chief Counsel attorney out of our Sacramento office, Kevin Snider, to talk about a very important parental rights case that we at Pacific Justice Institute have weighed in on. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Good to be with you.
Okay, now, Kevin, this case is out of Colorado, and it involves Child Protective Services or social workers infringing on the rights of parents. And I know we at Pacific Justice have filed a friend of the court brief in this matter before the United States Supreme Court. Give us some background on what this case is about.
A family in Colorado was the target of 6 false allegations which resulted in searches of their homes. And these searches were done without a warrant. And they fell, obviously, short of constitutional standards of probable cause and specificity of information in a reliable source. Nonetheless, the family was subjected to this. But despite every allegation being proved false, the social workers just kept coming after them when they would get additional reports against this family. And they went into the preschool. The child was in Head Start, and they strip searched a girl who was 3 at one point, and another second time when she was 4.
Okay, wait a minute, Kevin. I want to stop right there. You said strip searched. Now, this is not from a doctor. We're talking here about just a social worker and a nurse, right? Or what are we talking about here?
Social worker and a school administrator. So they would come. There was for example, an allegation that there were marks that resembled a handprint on her backside, or a bruise the size of a dollar bill, or another time there was little bumps on her face. Well, all of these, despite the location on her anatomy, they strip searched her and looked at her private parts. Parents unaware of this, they found out about it through comments the little girl made and did their own investigation. So this is a very broad and disturbing situation and search.
Right. Now, I want people to understand how serious this is. If they're just were listening sort of partially, we're talking here about not a doctor, not even an RN. We're talking about a social worker with a school administrator stripping this little girl down to nothing and checking out her personal area. I mean, if a stranger did this on the street, we would call this sexual child abuse because of the emotional trauma that can often take place when a child is examined this way by strangers. And yet this happened without proper due process, without a warrant. And as it turns out, there was not abuse of this family. And even though there were 6 tries by social workers to inspect the house, inspect the family, they still continued to keep badgering this family. Why do you think this was happening? What was I know there's an incentive. Isn't there an incentive social workers have for every child they end up taking? They get like $8,000, I believe, from the federal government. Is there a monetary incentive here, or is there some other factor that's coming into play?
Well, I don't know in this case, and there are financial incentives that state and county social services have. Whenever you have money involved in something, it often doesn't turn out well. What is the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and that's true 2,000 years ago, still true today. Yeah,
it definitely is, especially when it comes to the widespread, I stress widespread, tyranny of child protective services, of social workers across the United States. There's some great social workers who are doing good work at times, but I know one study that came out that said that by the Department of Health and Human Services said the majority of the time children would actually be better off staying with their children than traumatized, much less traumatized like this young, innocent little preschooler being stripped and strip searched and examined in a very outrageous, visually violating way, at the very least. So this took place. Where are we at now? How did this go into fruition in terms of a case?
Well, the parents sought legal counsel, and a lawsuit was filed on the parents' behalf against county workers on this. And that case went forward in Colorado. The case was dismissed due to immunity, and went up to the 10th Circuit and was affirmed. So that's where we're at on that.
Now, you say it was dismissed because of immunity. I want people to understand what is the argument here is. We're basically talking about statutory law that says social workers could basically do what they want, I guess, in these circumstances, and there's no accountability at all?
Well, that's one of the problems. Is there are statutes that say that social workers can go and or are required to go and investigate every allegation of child abuse. The problem is that we still have supposedly a Fourth Amendment, a Bill of Rights, and so they do these searches without proper probable cause that the Constitution requires, and so. And courts they're doing this because courts are backing them up, saying that they don't really know that this is wrong, that you shouldn't do that, as if anyone with any common sense would know that when you require someone else to take off their clothes, that the government's burden of proof, the specificity and the reliability of the specific information has to be at its zenith.
Right. And so they don't have consent from parents. They don't even have notice to parents to let parents know what's going on. And then they have the audacity to do this without even getting a warrant to justify this person who's not a doctor, not a psychiatrist, just a social worker, to go out and egregiously violate the privacy of this family in terms of invading their home, as well as in visually violating and physically violating this precious little preschool girl. So this is a terrible situation what's happened. This case, unfortunately, is not just isolated. We have a real problem nationwide. States have different policies and procedures, but Colorado, what we're talking about, is unfortunately all too normative, and that's why this case is so important. Now, Kevin, just for the sake of argument here, okay, why shouldn't social workers, law enforcement be able to invade a home or strip search individuals? Why shouldn't they be able to do that? I mean, after all, they're there to protect the people, to enforce the law, to find the criminals. Why shouldn't they be able to do that?
Well, that's a good question. The simplest answer is that we live in a constitutional republic where there is the rule of law. We have a Bill of Rights, which places restrictions on the government. And the rule of law does not mean the rule of law enforcement.
Right.
The founding generation of this country did not want to create a police state. So authoritarian regimes have very low crime rates, but most of us would not want to live in a nearly crime-free North Korea or Saudi Arabia.
Right, right. So we're talking here about due process, protection of constitutional rights, and these examples are horrific, absolutely horrific. Okay, so as we filed this, how important is this friend of the court brief? What role is it, and what exactly is a friend of the court brief?
Friend of the court brief is to provide argument or information not addressed or fully developed by the parties that will help the court in its deliberations. So, for example, we have in the past filed Friends of the Court brief going back into historical circumstances that relate to the law, and those types of things. Sometimes social science, sometimes areas of legal arguments that have not been raised or fully developed.
Okay, so Kevin, what did we actually argue in this brief?
We provided court cases and evidence, social science evidence regarding the psychological trauma that individuals face when they are strip searched. One court mentioned that one of the clearest forms of degradation in our Western society is to strip a person of his clothes.
Right.
And we again went to instances of studies and court cases and found that women find it extremely difficult to talk about such searches of their bodies. One woman has a quote, "It was just the most horrifying thing that I have ever gone through. I could not tell my husband. I could not tell my family. I couldn't tell anyone. It was a traumatic thing to me. I couldn't even talk about it." And another one is they report instances of shock, panic, depression, shame, rage, humiliations, and nightmares. Well, we also found that there was research that children are especially susceptible to possible traumas from strip searches. And unquestionably, childhood resides in a time of great modesty and privacy of one's body parts. So you have the common, I guess I'd call it archetypical dream of appearing nude in public, in a public place. People often have that dream. Well, in a child's imagination, sexual abuse typically takes the form of standing naked in front of others.
Okay, so this is needless to say, a serious, egregious, harmful violation of privacy, and we articulated that very clearly in the friend of the court brief. Kevin, I want to thank you for the work you've done on this on behalf of the Pacific Justice Institute to advocate for this family and for this innocent little girl. And let's just hope and pray that as things progress, that we will have greater due process protection. We need reform across the United States, folks. We at Pacific Justice have prepared for model legislation for all 50 states to give greater due process protection. If you want that information, contact Pacific Justice Institute, and you can forward that to your state legislator, and we can start seeing reforms that need to take place. Kevin, thank you once again for being on the program.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So, folks, there you have it. It's our God-given freedoms we're talking about. Now, let's choose to keep them. I'm Brad Dacus, president of the Pacific Justice Institute. Have a great weekend.